First of all, I'm now pressing the program AE button here, and then it automatically brings the exposure to automated. So you can see the small A symbols next to the iris value, which is in f-stops, and then the gain control, which is in decibels, and this is the shutter speed, which is in this means 1/100th of a second. And then this other symbol here, I explained, this is the autofocus, manual focus symbol. Now I'm changing, I pressed it again, so now I'm fully auto. And then this other value here, this is what you can see, is the AE shift. By default, the camera is not set to this value. Now I am pressing the menu button here for 2 seconds, and I keep pressing it, and here you see go, so it automatically jumps over to the dial setting. That's an excellent feature of this camera. Therefore, you have immediately the option to change the main function of this dial to control the exposure. This is what I call E mode, exposure mode, or auto exposure shift, which is the A mode. So in my case, now I press again the menu button, I am in A mode, meaning that everything is auto. And now let's just change over to exposure mode. Here you go. And then everything changed, all these small symbols changed from A to E. And practically they are almost the same. Now when I am just turning the dial, and then here you go, I can now control the exposure. Overexpose, the shutter speed is dropped, and then underexpose. Overexpose again, see how it behaves. Okay, so in my camera system I have 12 decibel is used for the gain limit. The way it is set is that I press menu and then camera microphone, and then here I can go down and then exposure. Now it's focus, and then AGC limit. This is the AGC limit, is to be used, that is 12 decibel, 9 decibel, 6, 3, and so on and so forth. Of course the maximum is 24, or remove it completely, disable it completely. So this is how to set the gain control. Dial setting. So the dial setting is exactly the same which I demonstrated a minute ago when I kept pressing the manual button for 2 seconds and they display exactly this menu. So this is another possibility to change the settings. Okay, and now I am pressing the shutter button, and again the situation is exactly the same. That is, now I have the option to modify the shutter speed, and as you see again the auto exposure, the value for the gain is adjusted accordingly. So the A and E mode in this regard are very similar. And this is one of the possibilities to operate. However, I prefer the other possibility, prefer the A mode. And then I prefer to use A shift. Now I'm just pressing the manual button for 2 seconds, and then I change the A shift. Press again the button. Now everything, so press again A, so everything is auto. Now when I am pressing the manual button, then all of the A values remain, but now my button shows me how much exposure value I am underexposing. The maximum is -2, or how much I am overexposing. The maximum is +2 EV. So I definitely prefer this auto exposure over to the E mode, over to the exposure mode, because exactly this. And then it also of course works fine with when any of these parameters are set manually. For example, I'm pressing the shutter button, and then I change the value down to 50. Here you go. And then while keeping at 50, I press again the manual button here. It jumps over to the exposure compensation or AE shift function, and then I will have the option to modify the exposure while the shutter speed remains the same. And this setup is, in my opinion, absolutely elegant, because in my system I have the gain is maximized to 12 dB, and then the algorithm, the logic is perfectly fine in this camera. So that way I can easily adjust the exposure values for the shutter speed, that the shutter speed is fixed to 1/50th. One thing which is really surprising, let me just jump back to fully program. When I fully auto, as seen here, let's just go back the 0 exposure. Yep, this is 0. And then there is no symbol here for for the ND auto. My camera at the moment is set to an important things I haven't explained a moment ago, and these are these buttons here, the ND control on this camera, and this is the auto and manual. When in manual, you have to manually change the ND filter values from 1, 2, or 3 position. 1/4, then 1/16, and then the third is 1/64 light reduction values. So that is the ND control. So typically, when you keep it in auto, the camera is smart enough to prevent too high aperture values because of to prevent diffraction. So it automatically changes internally the proper ND filter. But my observation so far that this works only in auto mode, when the exposure is auto mode. Check out what's happening when I am in full auto. When I am pressing the shutter value and say I change it to 50, 1/50th, then I press again the manual button. Then this ND off is displayed here, meaning that be prepared because ND is off. And then at this time, when any of the values, at least this is how it works in this mode. This is the A mode, I call it A mode, with AE shift mode. Then you have to manually control the ND filter. It is not controlled automatically for you. So even when I change the exposure values, the camera definitely will not control automatically the ND values. It will only control the iris and the gain. So that's keep in mind again. So if any of the values are changed to manual, then ND should be handled manually. Let me just check if when I am changing this, let me just go back to 0 EV value, and I am changing the from AE shift to exposure. I press it again, and here you go. The camera now is in E mode, and what is interesting that this ND symbol here, ND off remark or warning, is gone. So when I'm now changing the exposure values are changed accordingly, and I'm pretty sure that the ND filters are changed, adjusted accordingly to prevent high F iris values. Let's just again apply the same trick. Here you go. Immediately when I press the shutter button, that ND was off again. So what I wanted to demonstrate now, that whatever system, either you use this exposure or AE shift, the result is equal. So whenever any of these values are set manually, the neutral density filters should be operated and controlled by hand. They are not controlled in an automated way anymore.